usually get to speak about women directly, although obviously working on healthcare is intrinsically related to women's rights and equality rights in general. But so I was kind of thrilled to do this, and I actually spent the last few days in West Palm Beach with my parents, a place that I absolutely hate. I don't like the sun. I'm so white, I'm off green. I know. I sit in the sand and I'm just miserable. And so we drove around, we looked at these mansions, really they're palaces of these incredibly wealthy people. Donald Trump is down the road, and just up one town is, what's his name, the golfer?
Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods, you know, and a whole host of other rogues who don't treat women very well. And I was inspired actually there to focus my remarks more, I think, on women and poverty than other things. I thought originally you were talking about women who are fighting for change, and I'm going to do that towards the end, but really I was thinking about the United States and how extreme the wealth and poverty is there, and how in Canada it's becoming more extreme. And I just thought that was probably the most important thing that I could do here today. So, but I don't feel good, of course, talking about women and poverty in Canada without taking a look around the world first. And obviously, women here have made many gains that are not enjoyed by women in other parts of the world. And more than 30 years ago now, the United Nations adopted a convention to end all forms of discrimination against women. And it's one of the most ratified conventions that there is. But it still remains unratified by a number of countries. In my last reading, it was still unratified by the U.S. Does anyone know, have they signed on to it yet? I don't believe they have. And since then, though, in the 30-plus years since that convention was signed, there has been progress made in many countries. In Morocco, for example, in 2004, they passed a new family code protecting women's rights in marriage and divorce. Mexico toughened its laws on violence against women in 2007. The expansion of microcredit in particular has helped women in the global south to gain access to savings and credit mechanisms. There's now, I think, a much deeper global consensus on the centrality of women in community development, something that has emerged really very significantly. And I think some Canadians have been instrumental in even raising the profile of that more, including Stephen Lewis and other people. But 30 years after the adoption of the CEDAW Convention, many girls and women still do not have equal opportunities to realize rights. Still, in many countries, women are not entitled to own property or inherit land. Social exclusion, honor killings, female genital mutilation, trafficking, restricted mobility, early marriage, among other things, deny health, the right to health to women and girls. They increase illness and mortality for women and girls around the world. Women continue to be subject to persistent discrimination in education, employment, and healthcare. And violence and sexual exploitation remain serious problems. Women, according to a study in the early 2000s, do 2/3 of the world's work, receive 10% of the world's income, and own 1% of the means of production. Women cultivate, plow, and harvest more than half of the food in the world. In sub-Saharan Africa and the Caribbean, women produce up to 80% of basic food. Yet in UNICEF's 2007 report, in industrialized nations, women earned 57% of men's earnings on average. In Latin America and the Caribbean, it was 40%. And in the Middle East and North Africa, where revolutions are now sweeping, it was 28%. So while there's much reason to hope, and I believe that all of us should be looking to support women in the Middle East or North Africa to achieve an expansion in women's rights as revolutions are sweeping through their region. In countries where women's rights have been established or have gained solid ground, we need only to look at the anti-public service policies that are sweeping Britain and the United States, to see that those gains are quite seriously at risk, perhaps at the most serious risk that we've seen to date. I work in defending public health care because it's inextricably related to these issues. In fact, I started my activism in university working in anti-poverty movements. And what many people don't realize is that huge public services like health care and education are not just public services in that they give people free access to services at point of need, not based on the ability to pay, but based on people's need for them. But they're also huge income transfers. And in Canada, this makes a huge difference for women in particular, but for all groups that are otherwise marginalized or treated unequally. In fact, healthcare in Canada is always talked about as an expenditure, but in truth, it transfers more than $130 billion in income from the wealthiest to the rest of us each year, based on our ability to pay, used in free healthcare services based on need. And what that means is that when we're sick or when we're old, when we're least able to pay for care, we get it. And we pay into it when we're healthy, when we're well, and when we're earning, when we can do it. And all of the large social programs do that. Unemployment insurance, the pension programs, education, all of them do it. And all of those systems are in one way or another under attack, either under threat of privatization or under threat of dismantling in various different ways. And one of the ways that that attack happens is an attack on the public service as an employer of people. And I just want to give you an example of what that looks like, particularly because of what's happening in the United States. I'm assuming that people here, it's been in the news here, that it's sort of sweeping across the United States, the attack on collective bargaining rights for public servants. And as Elaine said, it was sort of part of my speech, but unionization actually impacts women dramatically, increasing their wages and moving them much closer towards equal wages than is the case for non-unionized women. It actually makes a big difference, and that is through collective bargaining, through the power of getting people together and being able to set the terms of employment, the wages and working conditions. It's a very important thing, and in fact, there's a report in The Economist magazine, not a notably left-wing magazine by any means, that talks about how the erosion of collective bargaining power has contributed to the growing gap, the increasing inequity that is happening.